People used to think that Japan would have the biggest economy in the world. Japan had the first advanced economy in Asia after the Second World War, thanks to a focused effort to rebuild and industrialize. In the decades that followed, its legendary work ethic, strong focus on industry, and technological progress made it the second largest economy in the world. For a while, the islands, which aren't very big, were economically close to the USA, which is much bigger and has a lot more people. Japanese companies, technologies, and symbols are still used a lot in movies, video games, and other media in the semi-dystopian cyberpunk genre. This is because, for a long time, it reflected people's hopes for a future where advanced Japanese companies would rule the world. Instead, we got a bunch of tech companies from California, which doesn't make us feel better, but that's not the point. The point is that everything was based on the assumption that Japan would be the leader. That future never came true, of course. Japan's economy has been stuck for almost 40 years, and despite being the world's biggest economy at one point, it has recently lost its spot to that other post-war miracle. It's in the news right now because its currency is losing value, and because of that week last year when it joked about blowing up the global banking system. Numerous economists have spent their whole careers trying to figure out what went wrong and how to fix it with Japan's rise and halt. But after all this time, it might be more important to ask if this is even a problem at all. Japanese people still have a very good quality of life. They don't have the same problems with housing being too expensive as we do. They also have some of the longest life expectancies in the world. Their cost of living has been more stable. And even though they are known for working too many hours, they now work fewer hours than many Western countries. So, has Japan fully accepted economic stagnation? If so, what are the benefits? And finally, and this may be the most important question, can the economy stay stuck forever without having some bad effects? The US, France, West Germany, the UK, and Japan all got together in 1985 at a fancy 5,400 square foot hotel in New York City to sign a deal. They called it the Plaza Accord after the building that was used for the meeting. On the surface, most of these agreements seem friendly, with world leaders getting together for the obligatory photo op. But behind the scenes, the US was growing worried about the growth of these competing countries, especially Japan, and they had good reason to be. 5 countries made a deal. The USA would intentionally lower the value of its own currency to make it more competitive, and more importantly, to make Japanese exports less competitive. This was done because the 5 countries were afraid of the rising manufacturing power in the East. It was clear that this was a good deal for the US. If an American car salesman wanted to buy a Japanese car, they would have to exchange their US dollars for an unfairly expensive yen. This would make them less likely to buy foreign cars because they would have to pay more. So why would Japan, a country that relies on exports and was thought to be able to outperform everyone at the table, boldly give in to such an odd request? To cut a long story short, they weren't stupid. Japan knew that leaving the deal would hurt their export-based economy, but they also knew that a trade war with the West would hurt them more in the long run. After all, the US gave Japan food for its growing population and resources to boost production, while Japan used these things to make cheap tech goods for consumers. It would be nice if people could just eat their old headphones when the fridge was empty, but Japan had 2 choices. It could go hungry and fall apart, or it could have a reasonable change in the value of its currency. Also, the Plaza Accord seemed to be good for both sides at the time. The value of the Japanese yen went up, making their goods more competitive, and it made their people very wealthy, so they spent a lot of money on trips, real estate, and even US companies. But after the Asian financial crisis in 1997, the party in Japan that was full of billion-dollar expense accounts, big stock purchases, and real estate speculation ended all of a sudden. Aside from robotic weights and new gadgets, Japan's economy has changed from being 20 years ahead of its time to being stuck in its glory days, lagging 20 years behind the countries that used to be afraid of its rise to power. And there isn't just one reason why this happened, but there are a few that really stand out. Causes that, ironically, helped them succeed in the first place, along with an explanation of how they basically accepted the way things were. Japan has a long history of not taking risks. which isn't always a bad thing. The only exception was the boom before the Asian financial crisis. This is something that only Japan does because they chose not to take chances in the first place. Many other countries do the opposite and pay the price. The country has a reputation for being very perfect, and this idea has become so common that most people agree with it. A lot of people spend years specializing in niche areas to make the best product or service, and business is no different. This is true for most things, like food or the many katana smithing videos on YouTube. In other words, when the market crashed, it was terrible for everyone in the country. This upheaval made people even more afraid to be entrepreneurs because they want to go against the grain. Most people decided to be safe and get a salaryman job, which was seen as more stable and respectable. Also, if someone does decide to go it alone and wants to start their own business, they will have to go through a lot of trouble to make it happen, such as getting registered, getting permission from the Ministry of Justice and tax officers, and possibly even facing multiple government barriers. This makes them not want to try. Because of this, Japan, which used to be known for its technological advances, is now far behind places like Silicon Valley, Seoul, and Shenzhen. In the early 2000s, calling an electronic gadget Japanese was pretty much the same thing as calling it a crazy cutting-edge piece of tech. They don't even market smartphones anymore, which are the one piece of consumer technology that has pretty much made everything else they used to make useless. A lot of this is because people don't want to take the chances that come with new ideas. Japan is ranked 29th in the world for how easy it is to start a business by the World Bank. That's not so bad if rules were the only thing stopping you, but there are some extra things that make it harder to get out of this list, especially for people from other countries, especially if they speak the language as their first language. English is the standard business language, for better or worse, and Japan doesn't put a lot of effort into learning it because they think it would mean giving up some traditions. Rough estimates show that only 15 to 28% of the people can speak English, and only 8% speak it fluently. Of course, this makes it harder for people from different countries to do simple business together. Also, most new technology is written in English, and it's easier for everyone to use it if it was made in English first. All of this means that Japan's culture doesn't like change, and the only times there has been big change in their history were when they had to deal with huge threats and changes in society. In addition, people are old because they live long and don't have many children. This isn't a good recipe for a likely tech change anytime soon. This may seem like a bad time for a country that used to be one of the richest in the world thanks mostly to these advances. But that's only because many people think an economy that doesn't grow is bad. A lot of well-known people, including Lawrence Summers, Paul Krugman, Robert J. Gordon, and others, have said that this kind of slowdown can be institutionally lethal for an advanced economy, leading to high unemployment, slow wage growth, fiscal stress, and all the nice public unrest that seems to follow. Japan, on the other hand, seems to be the right alternative. Its economy hasn't grown steadily in over 30 years, but it doesn't look like it's falling apart like those pessimistic experts say it would. But why is that? It's possible that the issue is not stagnation itself, but how a country's economy deals with it. To begin, Japan has had very low inflation, in part because Japanese people don't like change. People expect prices to stay the same, which is both good and bad, because in the past, companies had to publicly apologize for raising prices. While we'll talk about the bad later, this is a good thing, because it means that even wages that have stayed the same have been able to keep buying power in the United States. This has kept businesses from having to raise wages like they do in other developed countries. Partly because of this, job security is very high. 87% of people aged 15 to 64 have paid jobs, which is 11% higher than the world average. Their standard of living is also very good, which is due to Japan's great reputation for high-level institutions. Japan is praised both at home and abroad for having very low crime rates, which seem to have kept going down after a short rise at the start of the 21st century. This is important to note because, at least in part, this is because Japanese people have a lot of chances to succeed. In 2024, the government spent 8.51 trillion yen, or about 55 billion US dollars, on education, making it one of the biggest budgets in the country's general account. And while comparing spending to the US doesn't show much growth, Japan always gets a return on its investment and is often the leader in important fields of study. They've shown that they can get a lot done with very little, and of course the country has a reputation for having a very strict work culture, where people do nothing but go to the office and sleep. This does happen in some companies, but it's more of an urban legend than a real thing right now. Now work fewer hours a year than people in the US, but it should be said that both countries have done a lot of work that hasn't been reported in the past, so take these stickers with a grain of salt. It's all just a guess. Even so, Japan's economy has stopped growing, which seems to have fixed another big problem that almost every other advanced country in the world is having right now.